right, happy National Donut Day, everybody. Are you celebrating National Donut Day? We are, with donuts. What's your favorite kind of donut? Leave me a comment in the comments and tell me what's your favorite kind of donut. Hey, are you guys celebrating? Good morning, Stacy. Great to see you. I hope you're all doing well. It's Julie Hamilton with Life Builders, bringing you simple tips to build a strong and healthy life on. Hey, Erica. I got some help over here celebrating National Donut Day. I hope you are too. What's your favorite kind of donut? Okay, I actually have a better question. I saw an article yesterday on how those pink donut boxes are only in Southern California, but I don't think that's true because we have pink donut boxes in Napa, in Northern California. Ooh, Boston cream. Oh, you like the cream filled. See, I don't know. I've never gotten into cream or jelly filled. I'm just not good at filled donuts. I'm like, it squirts. I don't know. I'm really boring. Donuts, buttercream bakery. Oh, she says she likes a buttercream bakery maple bar. That's what Livy's eating right now.
I'm eating one right now.
Yeah, they had this thick layer. If you've never had them, they had this really thick layer of maple on top. Like it's spread. I mean, it is thick. It's not some kind of runny frosting. It's like thick. Yeah, that is the best ever. And then they have these ones where they put bacon on top of that. Livy's had it. I don't have it. Anyway, hope you guys are doing awesome. Hey.
They're really good.
You thought they were really good. We're going to jump right in today. We're talking about finding the opportunities that are found in suffering. And often when we think about suffering, we don't think, wow, I bet there's a lot of opportunity here. But I wanted to give you today a little bit. I'm going to change this. Hold on just a second. I wanted to give you today some food for thought about opportunities in suffering. And a lot of this food for thought is going to come from two books that I recently read that I think every human on the planet should read. You know, sometimes we think we're just suffering needlessly, and there is actually more to suffering than just making it through. And I love that. It's such a beautiful point. And the first book, and I'm going to read a little bit to you about this concept, is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And you should read this book. What it is he's a psychologist. You've probably heard me talk about this a lot lately, but it just impacted me so much. He's a psychologist, and he gets taken as a prisoner to a concentration camp. And he's there, and he begins to study why some people survive and why some people don't. And he goes into these really deep explorations about where you could find humor in concentration camps. We don't think about humor being there, do we? Where you could find art in concentration camps, where you could find nature and beauty. And he goes into all these stories and these incredible lessons that he learned there, about what helps people survive suffering and what causes them to give up hope. And that was the main difference in the people that survived and the people that didn't, is the people who survived were people who had something that they kept in their heart and mind alive, that they didn't just give up and think that their best days were behind them. That really became the major point. But I want to just read this to you. And I know this was written like probably in the 40s or 50s, 1959 it looks like. But as I'm reading this part, think about how it applies to you today, because it's so powerful. And some of it does deal with concentration camp, but you'll understand what I'm saying. It says, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others and giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they were sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one last thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. And there were always choices to make. Every day, every hour offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would or would not submit to those powers which threatened to rob you of your very self, your inner freedom, which determined whether or not you would become a plaything of circumstance, renouncing freedom and dignity to become molded into the form of a typical inmate. Seen from this point of view, the mental reactions of the inmates of the concentration camp must seem more to us than the mere expression of physical and sociological conditions. Even though they had lack of sleep, insufficient food, and mental stresses, and it suggests that the inmates were bound to react in certain ways, in the final analysis, it becomes clear that the sort of person the prisoner became was a result of an inner decision and not the result of the camp influences alone. Any man can, even under any circumstances, decide what will become of him mentally and spiritually. He can retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp. And this poet said, "There is only one thing I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings." And those words frequently came to my mind after I became acquainted with those martyrs whose behavior in camp, whose suffering and death bore witness to the fact that the last inner freedom cannot be lost. It can be said that they were worthy of their sufferings, and the way they bore their suffering was a genuine inner achievement. And it's this spiritual freedom, which cannot be taken away, that makes life meaningful and purposeful. And he goes on, "The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering that it entails, the way in which he takes up his cross, gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult of circumstances, to add deeper meaning to his life. It may remain brave and dignified and unselfish, or in the bitter fight for self-preservation, he may forget his human dignity and become no more than an animal. Don't think that these considerations are unworldly and too far removed from real life. It's true that only a few people are capable of reaching such high moral standards, and of the prisoners, only a few kept their liberty, their full inner liberty, and obtained their values which their suffering afforded. But even one such example is sufficient proof that man's inner strength may rise him above his outward fate. Such men are not only in concentration camps. Everywhere, man is confronted with fate, with the chance of achieving something through his own suffering. So suffering is not, we have a choice what to do when we're suffering. See, and he goes on, "Take the fate of the sick, especially those who are incurable." I once read a letter written by a young invalid in which he told a friend that he had just found out he would not live for long, that even an operation would be of no help. He wrote further that he remembered a film he had seen in which the man was portrayed who waited for death in a courageous and dignified way. And the boy had thought it a great accomplishment to meet death so well. And now, he wrote, fate was offering him a similar chance. And he goes on to talk about the stories of those who met death well, who met their suffering well by not asking. He says that we don't ask life what it wants of us. Life is asking us. Wait, what does he say? Yeah, we don't ask life what it wants, what we want from it. Life is asking what it wants from us. And whatever fate is, whatever circumstance comes along, you have the chance to really decide what you want to do with that. And I love this because he talks about dignity and suffering. And have you ever guys had that chance where you're just like suffering and you're like, why am I going through this? This is awful. But you know what? You can find the choice. You have the choice in any circumstance that you're going through. You have that inner freedom to choose what your attitude will be. You have the inner freedom to choose how you will suffer. Will I suffer brave and dignified and unselfishly, or will I just suffer like an animal who's just let go of everything? And that book brings me to the very next book. And the next book is When Breath Becomes Air. And Matt said, great book. I'm not sure which one you mean, but they're both really good. But that brings me to this book, When Breath Becomes Air. When Breath Becomes Air is a story of a man who is facing a terminal illness. And he takes this opportunity to really speak into our lives and to enlighten us, to encourage us to go on. He faces death in such a dignified and amazing way, like inspiring way, that it makes me want to like do better in my life. And that's the whole point. And so When Breath Becomes Air is written by a neurologist. He's just like a promising neurologist. He helps people with cancer, and he's talking about his experience as the doctor and the kinds of things he used to maybe say to patients. And then he goes on and he gets terminal cancer. And now he's the patient. And he talks about that process of going through treatments and going through the life-altering things that you're going through and finding his identity, whereas before his whole identity is wrapped up in becoming a neurosurgeon. You know, do I have a baby or not? Is it fair to leave my wife with a baby when I'm not going to be around? All of these things, is it compared to the joy that I might feel as a dad before I leave this planet? And all of these things. And so he, to me, embodies this book where he made a choice about what his death would be like and what the process of dying would be like, what the process of being terminally ill would be like for him. And so I just encourage you, I think every single person on the planet should read these two books. So Man's Search for Meaning and When Breath Becomes Air. These are two powerful books. And I'll tell you, the days that I feel like complaining about my life, and I think about this book, and I think about the things that they went through, and I think about the motivations that he gives that keeps people going, even in the worst, very worst of circumstances you could ever imagine. And he tells stories. It's not just lecturing, but he tells a lot of stories in here that will inspire you and encourage you. So go on Amazon, buy these two books. I'm going to put the links in the comments. They are so good, and you will be changed for reading these two books. Go get them. All right, I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I hope that you can find some meaning in your suffering. I know that some of you are going through really hard things and even physical things. Like I'm thinking about the list, and a few of you I know are facing chronic illnesses and long-term things, and I just want to encourage you to face that suffering with bravery and courage and dignity, unselfishness, and just know that there's opportunity in your suffering for you to shine and to bring light into the world. And this one story I wanted to read you, but I think it's too long, probably is there's this one day in Man's Search for Meaning where one guy is going to be in trouble for stealing some potatoes. And they said to everybody, listen, if you tell us who this guy is, there's a burglar in the camp and he's going to be executed because he stole some potatoes. They were all starving. And so not one man in the camp is willing to give him up. 2,500 men end up going without food because they don't want to give this guy up. And they're all like angry and irritated and hungry and cold. And so somebody says to Viktor Frankl, hey, why don't you share a speech? And he's like, oh my gosh, I do not feel like talking or sharing a speech. But he starts talking about the motivations that keep people going, like looking to the future. What's in the future? What have you, and he says to them, what have you lost that is not replaceable? Like we've lost careers, we've lost families, we've lost furniture, we've lost homes, but very little of that is not replaceable in reality. And then he starts talking about what are you looking forward to? And so he gives you all of these little keys that he used and all of these people used to get through this terrible, terrible suffering. So I just encourage you, if you're going through suffering, look for the purpose, look for the future, look for the opportunity. So anyway, the opportunity was he had this opportunity to speak to all of the men in his bunk, and he said he didn't feel like he made a difference, but at the end they came up to him and they were crying and they were renewed and he's like, I can't believe, like in this darkest moment I had this opportunity to speak. And so in your darkest moment you have an opportunity to be a light to where you are and where you're going. So I just encourage you to do that with bravery. Be courageous. Be courageous. God's on your side, and you are going to come through this suffering. And, you know, even if it ends like they did, even if it ended in losing your life, there's still a moment where you get to choose what you're going to do up to that very last breath that you have. So choose life, and choose courage, and choose being brave, and choose love, and all of those things that are going to sustain you, and hope and joy. All those things are going to sustain you through your suffering. And I hope that all of you have a wonderful weekend and enjoy your National Donut Day. All right? And I love you, and may your minds be fierce and your heart strong and your spirit kind. If you read these books, let me know what you think about them. They're awesome. Read them. Okay, bye.